We'll do a review of the Lekutei Sichas, Chelek Tezvav, volume 15, the second sicha for the Parshas Lech. In this sicha, the Rebbe explains how the storyline that we read about Avraham and the rest of the Oves and the Golus Mitzrayim are still important even now that we receive the Torah, and we technically have a much higher level because we have a level of Torah which was given to us, as explained in many places, but yet, in order to fully appreciate the gift that we have to go through Mitzrayim, we have to go through the Oves. There is something to be taken from that, and that is why that's why we learn this. So let's look inside. Aleph, Shengeret fil mo. This has already been discussed many times. Das was is mevuir in Chassidus bekama mekoymus. This that it is explained in Chassidus in many areas. Wegen dem Chiluk zwischen Limud HaTorah und Kiyum HaMitzvos von Avraham. The difference that was the study of Torah, the observance of mitzvahs, that Avram did, how it differs with the Torah mitzvahs that we do. Avram also studied Torah. Avram did mitzvahs. Vi Razal Zogan, our sages of blessed memory say, Avram Avinu Zokin v'yeshiv b'yeshiva chulu. Avram Avinu was an elder. He was sitting in the yeshiva, and he was studying Torah. Also, this is as far as mitzvahs, we see also Avram Avinu as kol ha-Torah kula ad shelei nitna. Avram Avinu performed all the mitzvahs of the Torah even before he was given. So that's as far as Avram. And also, by Yitzchak, Yaakov, they were all, this is still on a different level the way we do Torah mitzvahs today. Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Shvatim, and the tribes, this differs between their mitzvahs and the Yidden of after Matan Torah. Why is there such a difference? Because they weren't given the Torah. They did the Torah, they did the mitzvahs, but the Torah was given after Matan Torah. As a yois the limud ha-Torah v'kiyum ha-mitzvahs from the Oves, since the study of Torah and the observance of mitzvahs of the forefathers is given far Matan Torah, that was before the Torah was given. Eiders is given der tzivu of limud ha-Torah v'kiyum ha-mitzvahs, before there was a command to study Torah and to do the mitzvahs. And this command, when Hashem commanded, came in a very special way. And by Matan Torah, the Eibishter descended, and he gave us the Elyonim below. Hashem al Har Sinai. Hashem descended on Mount Sinai. Thus haste. So because they were lacking, they didn't have that. The Oves, the Shvatim. Azer limud ha-Torah v'kiyum ha-mitzvahs is given, that their study of Torah and the performance of mitzvahs was bichlal in a general way. Could have been some exceptions, but they have not been commanded, they still did the mitzvahs, but they weren't commanded, they weren't told to do these mitzvahs. Nor mitzad atzma b'kerech atzma. So, but they did it on their own, from their own, and what they did it with their own strength. They didn't have Hashem's command to help them do it. So therefore they did not reach to the madrege from Torah, to the level of Torah, as Torah is higher than the created being. Even if we talk about creations that are of the greatest value, they couldn't reach that. They could not go beyond the Torah. Torah is higher than everything, but they could not reach the high level Torah. They can only reach the Torah, nor vi Torah hat hashayches und is verbunden mit Divroim und Zeir Avodah, only as Torah is connected and is tied to the created being and their service. That's where they reached in, because that is where they can connect, because it comes from themselves, and they don't have the power to go beyond themselves. As opposed to after Matan Torah, since there is already a command from above that we study Torah and observe mitzvahs. So now we're commanded already to do so. Otmen zusammen der mit, so together with the command, gegeben, Hashem gave us dem koyach hametzaveh. They wish to also put in the power of the commander, Haboyde, the creator, to the Grechen, that we can reach to Atzmus HaTorah, to the essence of Torah. Is Hecher legamri verwelt, as it's higher, totally from the world. We have the ability to reach the level of Torah as it's much higher than the world. And that explains why the Rambam says that when we do a mitzvah today, is not because Hashem told Avram Avinu or whatever before. We do it because Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu as a mitzvah to us, because that's a whole different level of doing the mitzvah. The Riber Zok the Rambam. That's why the Rambam says, und der Riber Zok the Rambam, and that's why the Rambam says, that whatever we push away, meaning what we don't do, the loisase, or things we don't do, or what we do, we don't do it only for the mitzvahs HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's because Hashem gave this mitzvah, this command to Moshe Rabbeinu, blessed peace unto him, not because Hashem said this to the prophets before him. As for example, we don't eat the limb of a living animal. It's not because Hashem prohibited it to Noach. It's because Moshe prohibited upon us Ever min hachai, with the fact that he commanded Sinai, in Sinai sheyiskayim isur Ever min hachai, that it should be sustained. That isur of Ever min hachai continues. And likewise, ein onu molim, we don't circumcise with Bnei Avram Avinu all of Asholim mol atzme, because Avram Avinu, blessed peace unto him, circumcised himself Anshe Beis and his family members. But rather because Hashem instructed us to Moshe Rabbeinu that we should circumcise. Just like he circumcised. But we're doing it because Moshe told us to do us what Avram did, not because Avram did it. The same thing is with the sinew of the Noshe, the Gida Noshe, that even though it started with Yaakov, we don't follow the Isur of our father Yaakov, Elo mitzvahs Moshe Rabbeinu but we just go by the mitzvah of Moshe Rabbeinu. So why is that? Because we only do davke kiyum Torah mitzvahs. Because specifically when we observe the Torah mitzvahs, as they were given by Matan Torah, they have the power of the Creator. Through them, through this, you bring down the essence of the Torah, because this is on a much greater level. So now we need to understand. So why are we learning and why are we discussing all of what happened? Every matter in Torah, which is an instruction, a lesson, is the Chayro and the Aveda from Eden, though that is also a lesson in the service of a Yid, also after Matan Torah. So what is the Hira? What is the lesson from Arichos HaSipur, from Avodas HaAdam, from the lengthy story of the service of the fathers in Torah Shebeksav and in Torah Shebal Peh? So in the written Torah and the oral Torah, we have all about the service of the office, and with a wide explanation in the Maimorim, in the expounding of the Chassidus, etc. This isn't the service that we do today when we study Torah, observe the mitzvah, which is after Matan Torah. You say, what happened, happened. Why are we learning now about what happened if that which happened is not something which is important to us? So why are we dealing with that now? Ois base. The Ramban beParsha Seinu is mevayer. The Ramban in the Parsha explains, as those was the Torah is meirich b'sipur hamasois v'chafiras habe'eres ushar hamikrim from the office, that the Torah prolongs in detail, relating the journeys, the digging of the wells, and the other happenings from the office from the forefathers. Kulam boim lelamid al ha'osid. They are all coming to teach us about the future. As stated in Medrash, as it states in the Medrash, Kol mashir la'ovis simen lebonim. Whatever happened to the forefathers is a sign for the sons. That is masbir, as he explained, ki kasher yovei hamikra leneched lenovi mishloishes ha'ovis. That when this happens to the Navi from the three forefathers, Yizboinen mimenu hadover hanigzer love lezare. He will reflect from it the item which is decreed to come to his children. The daki kol gzeiras irin kasher teitzim mikoyach gzeira el poyel, that all of the decrees of Hashem, when it comes from potential to actuality, at least there will be a similarity to what happened. As he brings the examples by the Nevi'im. So therefore, whatever took place by the Ovis, this serves as a sign from when they read about it, when it comes to them, this thing, so they know what is going to take place from what happened. So similar, so we can say about the Torah mitzvah of the forefathers, as Mavur Barucha in Chassidus, as explained at length in Chassidus. That the Torah mitzvahs of the forefathers were a preparation, and they give us the strength as that they should be able to be the giving of the Torah mitzvah of Matan Torah. So basically, that was a precursor. It came before. It gave the potential for later on. When as in the mitzvahs was in tuin, and when we do mitzvahs b'dvarim gashmim lachar Matan Torah, after Matan Torah, so that we should be able to draw down godliness that comes through the actions from before. So this would be a connecting piece why we still need, even when we have the Torah, but we still basing it on the Hemshech from the Maisa Ove Simul Bonim, that there should be godliness through our mitzvah. Okay, but those are facts about letting us know that this is the way it is, but it's also something that we can learn right now. We also have to learn from the others, which basically the Rebbe's argument is, we're not just telling us that the reason why we can do mitzvahs properly is because we are based on the Hamshacha of the others, but the actual, right now we're learning something, and the act of the others is important to us in our avodah. That itself is not sufficient. As there's sibur, since the story about the service of the forefathers is angestellt geworden in Torah, has been placed in Torah. So we're not just reading in Torah. Since once it's in Torah, but Torah is eternal. So the fact that this story is in Torah means that it is eternal, not just telling us something that happened in the past. Musman Zogan, we have to say this is nit nor ahaidah. It's not just letting us know, as the Ramban says, or the Hachome, or as the Rebbe brought down to say this preparation canal, There's also an eternal instruction, a lesson there, in the Avodah Lecha Matan Torah, in the service that follows Matan Torah. Gimel. Haderech Hanal. Haderech Hanal b'negei Avedus Ha'ovis, similar to that we were discussing before about the service of the Ovis. Why is it necessary, and what is the lesson for us? So we have also the same question about the exodus of Egypt. Is Oich the Shaila b'Shayches Golus Mitzrayim, also about the exile of Egypt. We're reading about when we were still in exile over there. What is the hero for the Sipur HaTorah wegen Golus Mitzrayim? What is the lesson from the story of the Torah about the exile of Mitzrayim? For Eden, for Eden in all times and in all places. This has already happened. They were in Golus. There was Mitzrayim is never going to be again. Befrat noch as es ken werden nit sein a Golus or Golus Mitzrayim. Especially, there can't be any more exile like a Golus Mitzrayim. So this will never happen again. So why would we have to read about the Golus Mitzrayim? Unaderech Hanal, and similar to the above, is euch bei dem Lecha nit maspik zu verantworten. It's just like we said before, it's not sufficient just to answer with the biur hayadua, with the known explanation as Golus Mitzrayim is givena hagdome, that was an introduction, the exile of Mitzrayim, to Matan Torah, to the giving of the Torah. So that means that we needed to have Golus Mitzrayim in order to get the Torah. The Hainu as Golus Mitzrayim is given a kur habarzel. It was like a metal kiln in which they were prepared, just like you prepare in the kur habarzel, the metal, so to prepare us. Also the poil that purifies, makes the silver pure. This poil, this impact as sicha in Welt. So going through Mitzrayim was a sicha in the world. As his own zayed roy lekabolas haTorah, so that Yidden should be fit for receiving the Torah. So while that is true, that was necessary, but what are we learning from it today? That's what happened. Since this is a portion of Torah, darf man sagen that we have to say das is an Eifel Nitzchi, das is an Eifel Nitzchi. So I would say this is something which is eternal. And this has an instruction with regard to practical in alles manim euch lacha matan Torah for all times, even after matan Torah. Says nor, the only thing is, was the inyan von Avedus Ha'ovis Golus Mitzrayim, that the idea that when we talk about the service of the fathers and the exile of Mitzrayim, in Sipurei HaTorah al Soiro la'achar matan Torah, as they are in the stories of Torah as a instruction for after matan Torah, seinen Zein an Eifun fun Hachona. So they are in a way of preparation to Lekamon. The Liber stehen Zein Torah al Sakdoma Bachona is the matan Torah. That's why they're written as an introduction and a preparation for matan Torah. So basically, in our service of Hashem, which we're going to learn from Golus Mitzrayim, and which we're going to learn from the Avedus Ha'ovis. So those are something that we have to learn in after Matan Torah. Those are instructions, eternal instructions. The only thing is that those lessons come as an introduction and preparation to the real performance of the Torah mitzvahs. And therefore, in the Torah, they come as a preparation because that's the start. The Hira also is a preparation. Now the Rebbe is going to explain the Inois Dalit, the Bir Bazet. So what's the explanation of this? The Chiluk Tzvishin Avedus Ha'ovis Unavedas b'nei Yisrael la'achar matan Torah v'kiyum Torah mitzvos. The difference between the service of our forefathers and the service of the Yidden after Matan Torah, as far as observance of Torah mitzvahs, is b'shtayim. There's two things. Hein mitzadem odom ha'oived, whether it is from the perspective of the person who's doing the work, hein mitzadem gilum el-maila, and also from the perspective of the revelation, what we get from above. By the ovis is der gilui durch zeir avodah given b'derech milmata l'mayla. By the forefathers, their revelation came through their work in a way from below to above, which means this haste. This means they seinen nis alle v'nizdachich geworden. They were elevated and they were refined. And therefore they were actually vessels, they were vehicles to the key, to the godly light was what made given that shone through their service. So from the people's perspective, they became on a higher level and worthy and refined enough to be able to get the godly light. That's from the perspective of the people. Same thing is the light that they brought down. Since it was a light which is relative and it is a comparison to the service of the created being, so the light shone by them in such a way, it came revealed to them. They earned it, they got it, and they were able to openly see the light that they had brought down. Oh, berin der avodas, ha-Torah mitzvahs b'nei Yisrael la'achar matan Torah, but in the service of Torah mitzvahs from the Yidden after the Torah was given, is nit b'kol echad ve'echad azah hizdachachas v'aliv by the others. So each individual person, each one and one, does not have such a refinement and such an elevation as by the forefathers. By them, it says that each one was a merkava. They became like a chariot. They were totally subjugated to Hashem, and they were refined. Only idach. And on the other hand, so first of all, we're not in such a great madrega. And on the other hand, through the Torah mitzvahs of the Yidden, we bring down such a light, was his hecher from Welt, which is higher than the world. The Meila steht es nicht as begillen. That's why it's not so open, because it's too high. It's on a higher level. The Tamadov. So why is there such a difference between their avodah and their gilui and our avodah and our gilui? So what's the reason? Farmat Torah is given the gezeira as helyonim leyordu l'tachtonim. Before the Torah was given, there was a decree that the ones above should not go down below. And the lower ones will not go up to the upper ones. As madreges elikus versus legamri hecher from Welt, that when we talk about a step, a level in godliness which is totally higher than the world, can't come down. So cannot extend into the lower levels. But let's say that he decreed this first, it nullified the first decree of Amr, and he says, the lower ones can go up to the upper ones, to above. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, and the Eberster came down on Har Sinai. Please, as Nivroim Tachtoinim, Kenan is Achad Vemetalukus, to the extent that the low creations below can unite, become one with godliness. Which is Legamri Hecher Pravelt, which is totally higher than the world. That took place in Matan Torah. Matan Torah Gufa is over given, der Gilui, But within Matan Torah itself, how did that revelation come down? In an oifen, from above to below. Das heißt, which means that Mata is not given kekelitz and gidoer. The lower level was not a vessel, it's not a receptacle, could not receive that revelation of light. Und der Far is oder oir nit gekommen in Goli. That's why it didn't come down in a revealed way, because it wasn't a vessel, a receptacle, a receiver. It wasn't a proper receiver for that. Ukiyadua, as it's known, as the Gilu Eir Likivos is given by Matan Torah, that the godly light revelation that took place at the Torah given is given Lefishah, that was only temporary. Und der noch is a nifsi geworden, and then later on it was interrupted. That once the sound of the shofar, they can go up to the mountain, because the kedusha of the descent of the Har Sinai was only temporarily, until later on it vanished and everybody can go up to the mountain later. No more kedusha there. In order for a yid to become a vessel for that light, shining light of Matan Torah, versus Hecha from Belt, which is higher in the world, is as Dafke durch sein Avodah. That comes specifically through his work. That way, it's accomplished a revelation and an internal unity. That's what you need to continue doing, is to take that revelation that was beyond the world, that came to the world, and have it stay permanently in this world. That's it. Hey, so that means move on. So now we understand with this, how the service of Abraham and the fathers in general in Kiyum HaTorah mitzvahs is a Chelek from Torah, that it becomes a part of Torah. It's an eternal lesson for every Yid in all times, even after Matan Torah. As der Gilui from Matan Torah soll nisgale v'nisachet werden mit dem Eden. In order for the revelation of Matan Torah to be revealed and fuse, become one with the Yid, Haloi Metorah Mekayim Mitzvah, who studies the Torah and observes the mitzvahs, Dar sein die Hagdome von Avodah Mitzad Atzma. Then you have to have first the service on its own. Derech Avodas Ovis, like the Ovis. It's shame we by Klolus HaAchon to Matan Torah, just like the general preparation of Matan Torah in a general way. Is Bichdei Azol Nimshach werden in der Brias. That is in order to extend into the creation. The Bechina von Elokus und Torah. That level of godliness in Torah was his Hecher from Welt, which is higher than the world. Hat früher gedacht sein die Schleimes in der Avodah Bittel von Nivroim mit Sadatzme. So first it needed to, before you can get the higher level, you have to first have the wholesomeness in the service and the subjugation of the created being in themselves. Und durch them, later on, through this mamshich sein, dem oir, was is shaykh und berach habriya. Then you bring down, extend the light, which is related to creation. But das hat sich aufgetan durch Avodas Ovis. That was accomplished through the service of the forefathers. The first level, the level that they can bring down, that is relative and connected to the creation. Und erst noch dem is nimshach geworden in der Bria. Then only afterwards, in this creation, was extended an oir versus hecher from Welt, a light which is higher than the world. So similarly, in the specific Yid's work, also he has to have the hachana first to do the koyach atzmai, and then to get that greater light that was the skala of Matan Torah. In order that that light which is beyond the creation was which comes in a way from above to below canal, zon is gala, it should reveal. When it's ached and become one, to fuse with them in with the Yid who's studying Torah and observing mitzvahs, dav by him freer sein shleimus havodah First, he has to have the complete service, and the subjugation and the refinement from his mitzias, from his being. He has to refine himself. That way, it is accomplished by him, this Achdus Mitelakus, the Torah Sheberach Habriyas, the union with the godliness and Torah which is related to creation. Then you become a vessel to the Ramshocha Vigilui, to the extension, revelation from Terasa Shalakadosh Baruch Hu, from the Torah of Hashem as it was revealed in Matan Torah, which is Gigamim Matan Torah. That level is much higher versus Legamri Hecha from the Bria, which is in a much higher level than creation. Rebbe, in the brackets, brings the example of the various different levels to connect to Torah. We can connect through Shaloi Lishma, and then to get to the Lishma, you have to first connect to Hashem with the level of Bria, from the own bittul and refinement, in order to become a vessel. This is similar to the saying of our sages of blessed memory. A person should always occupy himself studying Torah and doing mitzvahs, even though it's not for the sake of the heaven. Because it is from not lishma will come lishma. Was der say that is he says this order is not just that it could be. He says la'olam. He says the word la'olam, meaning that this is actually the way. That's the approach. We're not only talking as it is relates to such a person. When he starts to learn, starts to do his service, he can't learn lishma. So we're telling him start to learn lishma. No, the word la'olam nor does is there say that alimud api Torah. That is the order of learning according to Torah. Because through the study of Torah, not for the sake of heaven, not fila that hechster madrege for shaloi lishma. Even if we talk about a very high level shaloi lishma, wer der id vereinzigt mit der beginnes Torah. So then you connect, you become united with the level of Torah. Nicht wie sie ist mitzad atzma hecha from Welt, not in its way that Torah by itself, which is higher in the world, nor wie sie hat ashayches zu welchers is mitzis and all. It has some sort of a connection to the world because it's still shaloi lishma. Was is dem besteht der tachlis in welchen lernt. That becomes the goal for what he's learning, the shaloi lishma. Something there, not for the purity for Torah itself. Thus is the Hagdama, that becomes the introduction to tzukum durch them, to come through this, to reach to limud Torah lishma, to the study of the Torah for the sake of Aziz, Terasa Shalakadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem's Torah, to learn it just for Hashem, as a verbindt mit dem Eibrischten allein durch Terasa, that you tie yourself to Hashem Himself through the Torah. As the Torah is totally higher than dressing up in world. So basically, there is a process, there is a step by step, there is a shaloi lishma connecting to the Torah in this world, in the Metzias of world, in order to be able to reach later on from Metzias to the higher, to be a keli for the Gilu Eir of Shalom Mailo. Torah for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, uniting on the highest level of Torah. In Yeder Madrege for Limud Torah. Though Matan Torah impacted, affected a novelty in every level of study Torah, which means when the Hashem gave Himself by Matan Torah, came down into the world, that influenced every aspect, even the Shaloi Lishmos. As durch them that Nimshach Torah v'ziz hecher from Metzias, that when you are after Matan Torah, when you learn Torah, you draw down into the world from the higher, from the existence of the world, because that was the revelation that came down on Matan Torah. K'mayim Razal, as the sages tell us, Kol Talmud Chacham, any Talmud Chacham, sheYoshev v'koyre v'shonig v'isek b'Torah. He sits and he learns and he chumash and mishnah and he occupies himself with Torah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yoshev Kenegdei v'koyre v'shonig. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits opposite him and reads and learns together with him. So that means you are connecting yourself with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That was a mitzvah, similar also by mitzvahs. Was far Matan Torah doesn't give in. Before Matan Torah wasn't there because it wasn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was because it was the Gilu was from Olam. Is over the Hamshoche in an Eifman Helam. So that comes down in a hidden way. Kedei Azizol Adozol Nimshachar Begoli. In order for this to extend openly, when it's Achad Vermid the Metzias Aloymet to become one with the existence of the one who learns it, Darf by Im Zayin the Shleimus Aliyah, he needs to have the wholesomeness of elevation in Zichel Fazayin Metzias to refine his existence on this Achdus mit Torah v'Shaych zu Welt, and he needs to connect to the Torah that's connected to world. Then he can openly in a revealed world, Kiniska said earlier, be able to bring down the higher from world also in a revealed way, not only in heaven. Both. And Rebbe is going to bring out now that the idea when we talk about Hashem in a way that sometimes seems to be not real, talk about Hashem's hand, strong hand. But before the child, in it lies the second step. You have to start and think about the Yad HaChazaka, the strong arm, to get a perception or to get an understanding what we're talking about. So there's this gradual step. Similar to this, you also see in the Seder Alimud Avonas HaTorah Bayed Nidin, the order of study and how we understand Torah by every Jew. When you start to study with a 5-year-old the verse of the Torah, when you talk or discuss about Hashem, in Mloshen, the language is used from Yad HaGedolah, his big hand, Yad HaChazaka, his strong hand, so the teacher translated literally the Groise hand, the big hand, the starke hand, the strong hand von Ebersten Hashem. As much as you try to explain to the child, and to address it, to give it an idea of what's meant by the Ebersten, try to explain to the child, what does it mean, Yad HaGedolah, the big hand, Yad HaChazaka, a strong hand? The child looks at it as a hand. He still imagines that it's a big and strong physical hand. Or the hand is got a it is much greater and stronger than what he sees by his teacher or similar. But he still, frame of reference is a hand, a strong hand. Lecha. But one can question, so how could we teach this to a child? Since this contradicts the basis and foundations, the main foundations of our belief, Hashem has no body and no image of a body. So how does the true Torah demand, expect? There's a learner mitakin that you should teach a child, other mitakot or sometimes teaching a child in knowledge, even though he may be an adult, but he doesn't know much. And how do you teach him? The psukim umverter, those verses and words, was memuz that you have to explain them literally. Tell them, yeah, you have to explain. Ubefrat, especially, this is not only because we have no choice, we have to, that's the way to teach the child, but the Torah says that first you start with a simple meaning. Befrat as der Seder Alimud is their Seder Api Torah. This is the order according to the Torah, the way to teach. First you learn the Chumash in the simple meaning. Pshat Torah, this means the simple meaning Torah. The noch remez udrush, then you learn the hint and the expounding. And the noch seidus haTorah, and then the secrets of the Torah. So, why is this? Why is this that we're talking about things that seem to be not Torah Semes, doesn't seem to be real? And here we have to, that's the only way that the child's imagination would be able to perceive this. Zion. So this is a similar idea that you got to start from this. Is there beer in them? Explanation, the kids are I'm short at least. Has spoken already many times. That this that you teach a child, the simple meaning of the verse, and he imagines as Yad HaGadola, the big hand, the Yad HaChazaka, the strong hand, the Dugma, is a Yad Gashmi. He thinks of it as a physical hand. Not aggressive and starker, but a greater and stronger. From them was Zed, then that what he sees. Is this not hypochemis? This is not contrary to the truth. This is not true. When the kind versteht, because also the child understands. Those gufa was the yad gashmi from Zamalamed, the hand, the physical hand of his teacher Kiyotzeboy. Hot in sich koyach v'yicholos, that it has power, it has abilities. Und alle tchunas von yad, and all characteristic of a hand, is das nicht mit sein gashmis dicken bosser v'atzopes. It's not because of the physical flesh and bone, nor mitzad dem koyach v'chayes was he's doing them. It's the energy, the power and energy which is in the hand. The neshama, that's the soul. Afa pivos erveist klau nit was dosis, even doesn't know what is the soul. Unsein melamed weiß euch nicht, and the teacher also doesn't know. Now sagt as dos is, he just tells them this is an energy, a koyach, it's a power, v'chayes, it's a vitality. What comes from the Meibishter, it comes from Hashem. The Meila versteht der Kind, so therefore the child understands, as when es retzich wegen Yad HaGadola and Yad HaChazaka, when we talk about the big and powerful hand, und azoi euch the andere Te'arim Gashmi, also the other physical descriptions, is das avada nit mitzad the größer Gashmis diker kamos. It's not because the big physical quantity, but das is mitzad the ruchnis diker koyach. That has us, that's because of the spiritual power. From the Meibishter, from Hashem, was is in him, which is in him. Was haste. This means, as jeder inyan from Torah, every aspect of Torah was couldn't be the letter that one who is small in knowledge, learns from first state Kipshuta, understands literally, is dos alimut Torah semes. That's a true learning of the true Torah. It is Hashem's Torah. Says none of us are hot in them. The only thing, it has a very contracted knowledge. Which has been dressed up in Pshat HaTorah, in the simple meaning of the Torah, as it descends to the intellect of a 5-year-old. So it's true. It's not false that you're teaching the child, but it's been contracted and brought down to the idea of the child. And after this, only after this, then he reaches like the Seder al Torah, in the order according to the Torah, to the Havana, to the understanding from Ben Esser Shon in the Mishnah. To become 10 years old, then he can learn Mishnah. And then 15 years for Gemara, etc. As the Mishnah says over there, the various steps. As Bamitis Upnimius, that in truth and in the inner is that he is Baruch Mufshid Lagamri. He, blessed Hashem, is totally separated, undressed, not kept in these definitions from Gashmis, from physicality. Peace vidosis apisoitis HaTorah, to the extent that you come to the way it is according to the secrets of the Torah. Now, so similar to this child that we're talking about, the Kotten B'Yediyah, similar to this is this in the Bechina from Torah, this is in the level of Torah for anyone who studies Torah. First, you learn Torah the way it's at the root of your soul. Because their limud is that study, befrat in this detail, bedugma to limud Torah for the others. That is similar to the Torah that the others learned. The Hainu Torah versus Berach Habriya. That's Torah as it is connected relation. It's relative to creation. Was damut hoter shleimus hagilu by ilu. Then he gets the wholesome revelation and the elevation. Vidosis in the Bria, the way it is in the creation. And after kumter zu limud Torah, he comes to the study of Torah as it is in its ultimate elevation. Hecher from the Bria, higher than creation and the root of the soul. Torah is given Torah as is given by Matan Torah. Ches. So that's the introduction that needs to be first, and then you can get the higher level. Why? Ches. Der Tam Farvos is fodetz if the Agdome von Avodas Ovis. Why do we need to have first the introduction of the service of the forefathers? So that we can reach through the work of the person to the wholesomeness of his existence, which is to a lekus und Torah, to reach godliness in Torah that has a connection to the Bria, to creation. Als hachone, and that is as a preparation to Gili from Torah, to the revelation of Torah as it was given by Torah. Torah shel ma'ilo mabri, Torah which is higher than Bria. Why is this necessary? Is nit blois mitzad mata. It's not just because of the perspective, because below we can't receive it either way. We have to go gradually. Mitzad the mensch was learning Torah, the person is learning Torah, but rather mitzad inyan lamaila, because the essence above, it can't come down without the zeis mitzad Torah atzma, that is from the Torah itself. That it needs the person to first reach his level in connection to Bria, so that it can come down to the into the Bria. There say there be the Urshal Mailam Bria, the order as the light which is above creation, kumtarop in the Bria, descends into the creation, bis as ververtnis ached mit the Bria, to the extent that it becomes one with creation, is nit in an oifun. It's not in a way as kemoishu vert bald nimshich in the Bria. It's not as is, comes down into creation. Nor mitchila vert nimshich blois aha order for you. In the beginning, it only comes down a ray, an mitzumtzum, a very contracted light. Was kumbi slapshus in yone habriya, which comes dressed up in matters of creation. The way it descends, it goes down gradually. Then the essence of the air comes down. Just like with oil, it's also with the Torah, which is higher than creation. As far as sinners to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Matan Torah, that before the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Matan Torah can be given, which is Be'ena Rech Ma'abriya, which is totally not relevant, related beyond creation, is free nimshach geworden, or mit zum Zemes der Fun. First, a contracted light has been extended, the obvious, the Father. The beginnes hat Torah viziot ha-shayches, und is be'erech to the Bria, the level of Torah as it is connected and it is related to the Bria. And that's why it came. So now too, the order, the way to get the Lamaila, Ma'abriya Torah, has to come down first to the person, what he can accomplish. Also after Matan Torah itself, either as wird nisgale by a Yidden, the Rosh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shalomailam Ma'abriya, before it becomes revealed by a Yid, the teaching, the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is high Ma'abriya, that free and nimshach when nisgale, and first it needs to extend and reveal the Bechinas HaTorah, the level of Torah was hot HaShaychas to the Bria that is connected to creation. Then later on in him is revealed the Torah which is higher than creation. This is also similar to the order, the way we learn the Torah in the various different parts. You have to bring down the Torah step by step. Pshat, Remesh, Drush, Sod. Derech with the Seder Elimud and the Chelek HaPardes. the order of learning in the sections of the pshat, the simple meaning, the hint, the remes, the drush, the expounding and the secret, the soit of Torah, was einer wird nicht ausfüllt von zweiten. One evolves from the other. Pshat is nicht ausfüllt, the simple meaning is evolves for remes, and the remes from hint, the remes comes from drush, and drush from soit. Test. That is the order of Torah. Now, the Rebbe is going to say that's why we need Achana. But why do we need the story of the Golus Mitzrayim? So it's a test, but they say that I'm limited to Avodah now. But this order of learning and service it's still not a satisfactory preparation in order to be able to receive the Torah of Hashem, Shalamailo Mabriya, which is higher than creation. You also have to come on to the service of the exile of Egypt. Punkt Vidos is given the Pamarishon, just as it was the first time. As no the Torah mitzvahs avodas ovis, that after the Torah mitzvahs and the service of the forefather. But Gedarv Zayin Golus Mitzrayim, they needed to be the exile of Eden, als Achona to Matan Torah, to prepare for Matan Torah. But what can we say is the reason? The Torah is gegeben geworden by Matan Torah. Since the Torah, as it was given by Matan Torah, is hecher legamri from the Bri, is totally higher than the creation, is nit maspik, so it's not sufficient. Those was the nivra der gerecht mit seiner avodah, the fact that the created being reaches with his service to sein shleimus, to his wholesomeness. When der wird is achad mit the Torah, and he unites with the Torah. Vizi is berach habriya, as Torah is connected to Bria. It's not sufficient. Because the created being still has no relationship, no value to Hashem, to the Creator. There has to be a change in the Nivra also. The Agdomas Ha'Pa'ula from Golus Mitzrayim. That means you have to have the introduction what Mitzrayim accomplished by the person. But Davke durch them, only through this, going through the Golus Mitzrayim, you become revealed the Torah of Hashem. The Golus Mitzrayim is given, there state in Pasuk. What did the exile of Mitzrayim exist? Pasuk says, B'choimer, u'belovenim, u'bechol avodah basada, with the mortar, the bricks, all the work in the field, asher ovdu behem beforach. They worked them with laborious work. And the Zohar explains the Psukim is the Torah you're learning should be in a way that it's the hardship with intensity that it compares to all of us. In the only limit Torah is in Mezun and Zohar, the Zohar says, B'choimer do kal v'choimer. Choimer mortar, that's a kal v'choimer. B'levenim, bricks, that's libun hilchasa. Generally, when we talk about perach, is avodas noshim, la noshim. Give women's work to men, even though it may not be physically more difficult, but it's difficult because it's not what you're used to. Basically, Torah needs to be learned in a perach way, in a way that more than you're used to. The avodah v'yigia, the work and the effort versus which is opposite of the nature and what the person is used to. Specifically through the work and effort, which is opposite the nature, becomes the subjugation and the refinement of the existence of this created being, as in him, so Kenan is Galavern, that in him should be able to reveal to Rosh Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem's Torah, which is Hecher from Welt, which is higher than the world. Yud. So now the Rebbe is going to explain the story that the Tzemach Tzedek was once offered by his grandfather, by the Alter Rebbe, that he should be able to be very successful in learning Torah, he shouldn't have to work hard in it. And Tzemach Tzedek refused it. Then eventually the Tzemach Tzedek said that he should have accepted it because it would be a more opportunity to put the effort in if and after the blessing. And the Rebbe says that this is actually the level, the steps that went through. You have to go through. We can explain a surprising story, a seemingly surprising story, from the Admor Tzemach Tzedek, from the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek. When the Tzemach Tzedek is noch given young, when he was young, but Amol, der alte Rebbe, im reingerufen und gesagt, he called him in and he told him, as will him geben in Yonei Torah matoni. He wants to give him matters of Torah as a gift. The Tzemach Tzedek hat das nicht angenommen. Tzemach Tzedek didn't accept it. Sagen dich dem Tam, he said with the reason why. As Torah will never be here, he wants to take Torah through effort, through eigen haravani. He wants to work it out hard by himself. Kama v'kama shon mishpeta, many years later. When the Tzemach Tzedek added wisdom on top of his wisdom, became much greater. But that Tzemach Tzedek is Tzemach Tzedek says, as fadris, that he's sorry, he's upset for why he did not accept the what the Alter Rebbe offered him, the offer from the Alter Rebbe. For wifel heiche Torah in Yonim, the Alter Rebbe wollte ihm gegeben. As many great high aspects of Torah the Alter Rebbe would have given him, but then he still could have had effort in Torah. If noch heicher in Yonim, higher in Yonim. The Baldas Torah is Torah is without a limit, without an end, so he could have always found something else to put effort in. So one can ask on this. What was his idea in the beginning? And what does he think in the end? What changed over here? It's noch schwer zu sagen, it's difficult to say. That being in a situation that he was fit, as the Rebbe, Alter Rebbe, hat ihm gewollt geben in Yonim from Torah Matona, he wished to give him parts of Torah Matona, sich nicht gehabt auf Asas vor der Pshute. He didn't think of such a simple idea. He was such a great person in knowledge of Torah that he'll always find more. Why did he refuse that? So we can say the explanation is this wasn't a regret. That he didn't want to take before on his earlier not wishing to take from Torah Matona the Torah as a gift. But since that time that the Alter Rebbe wanted to give him, so he felt as in felt noch the achone von Avodas Hagi in Torah, that he was lacking the preparation that you have to work hard in Torah. A proper effort to get such a suggestion, such a proposal that was like, he didn't work hard enough to deserve this. But the Rebbe gehalten, so therefore he was of the opinion as there is noch nit kein Kele to the Torah, was the Alter Rebbe hat ihm gewollt geben Matana, that he's not a vessel, he's not a vehicle to that level of Torah that he wished to give him as a gift. After in which he actually reached that effort in Torah, when he was prepared, as there is a keli. Now he felt he was a vessel. Haroi to the matana shemutayr, to that gift Torah. As in his galaven, the Torah was his sicha for sein yigia, which is higher than his yigia. Yeshloimar odi akdoma now from the Avodah the yigia in Torah. That introduction from the work and the effort in Torah is a derech dugma is similar. The Golus Mitzrayim is given achona to Matan Torah, like the Golus Mitzrayim was an introduction to Matan Torah, to giving the Torah. This is Mitzichas Yem Beis the Chag HaShavuos Tovshin Lamed Hey and Purim Tovshin Chof Tes.